All right, is this working?
Howdy.
Awesome.
Howdy,
Hey, it's
howdy.
great to meet you.
Howdy. We
Sorry,
can't
I just have
start
your
till
stream
you
playing on
till
the
you say
background, and I
howdy
have to.
too. You have to say it too.
Oh, howdy, howdy. Nice to meet you.
There we go. All right. I've got a headache and I'm hungry. Hit me up. What do you got?
All right, it should be pretty fast. So first of all, thanks so much for agreeing to speak with me. I'm a PhD researcher, and my primary research area is kind of online aggression, and specifically, I'm looking at hostile donations. So how people might use charitable donations to hurt other people. And I was directed to you as well as some other kind of Twitch streamers and YouTube streamers in this space to have a conversation with. So before we get started, is it okay if I get your verbal consent that we can have this conversation and then I can use it for a paper?
Howdy. Yes, yes, you can.
Awesome. All right. So I guess the first thing is, could you just give me a brief introduction to who you are and what you do, just in like a couple sentences?
Yeah, my name is Vaush. I'm a YouTuber and a live streamer. I mostly cover politics, but that invariably branches out into a bunch of other tangentially related subjects. So I guess it's just variety streaming.
Awesome. And it seems like you do a lot of political content. What are your general politics?
I'm a libertarian socialist, so probably more left-leaning than most people.
Gotcha. All right. So let's get into it. This should be pretty rapid fire. There's probably not a whole bunch to talk about. So the first is a little bit of a conversation about donation-based harassment. So I understand that on Twitch and YouTube, you get donations and people can pay money to send messages. Do you get messages that include really mean comments as part of a donation?
Yeah, decently often. Not all the time, but yeah.
And what do those kind of look like?
Well, there are two kinds. Sometimes they're outright harassment or derision, where the only purpose of the donation is to make me feel bad. And sometimes it's a, sort of an antagonistic challenge. Usually this is a person will disagree with a take of mine, and they'll express that disagreement in, an unfriendly way. And I think those tend to be the more common of the two.
Okay. And do you find I'm not sure about your own personality and everything like that, but are you negatively impacted by those sorts of donations, or are they just kind of they roll off your back, they want it to hurt you, but you're not very hurt by them?
It would mostly be the latter. I actually think I like them a good amount, especially the more contentious, like challenging different opinion ones, because if for a person to pay money to insult you means that they care enough about your reaction to what they've done that they're willing to spend money on it. And that is like a... oh, hold on really quick. Could you set to push to talk? There's a feedback coming from your microphone.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries at all. Yeah. Um, what was I saying? It was, oh, right. Yeah. They care enough about your reaction to their donation. They're willing to spend money on it. And I take a lot of pleasure in never giving them the reaction that they want. You know, I mean, if you get used to it and you're prepared for the kind of like derision you're going to receive, you can usually engage with it in a way that it doesn't really let you break stride. The only exception to that, I guess, would be if the donation text-to-speech function is on, where it will automatically read the donation, in which case you don't have control over the time or way in which the information is delivered, and you kind of have to respond to it on the fly, which means you're a little bit more likely to get flustered or say the wrong thing or whatever.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And when you receive donations sort of like this, I mean, there's two ways I can imagine that kind of going about. It's you know, you could do something specific that people are very upset about, or people just have some generalized dislike of you. Do you have a sense of what the balance is for those sorts of donations?
I think it's usually the former, which I actually take to be something of a compliment. The just general derision, like hatred, non-specific, I don't like you type stuff, those people are only willing to spend so much money on you. Usually. Like, they can, if they want to hate me, they can email me, right? Like, you know, I have other means of contact. But when they are donating something disagreeable, and it's about a specific disagreement they have, even if they're framing it in a very contentious or unfriendly or rude way, it means they care about me, right? Because they're offended by the take that I have, not just that I have it. And it means that there's some, even if they're framing it in a disagreeable or like antisocial way, they clearly have some investment over how right I should be in their minds on any given issue. I think a lot of that stuff comes from people who hate watch in the sense that they don't really like you as a person, but they have some estimation of your intelligence and they care about that estimation. Otherwise, they wouldn't think about correcting you.
Okay, awesome. That's really all I wanted about the donation-based harassment. And then the other topic that I wanted to briefly chat about was I actually went on stream with Destiny yesterday to ask him, similar questions. He was another person that I was pointed to. And one of the things that I found is that he has this donation sound that appears to mock you. There's this donation sound where it sounds like you're saying, didn't say Simon Says, and then doing some machine gun sound. So my understanding is that you two have a history and you dislike each other. Could you give me a sense of what that history is like?
Oh God. I was a
I'm
member.
sure it's a really big topic. I saw there was manifestos going back and forth and stuff. I don't know everything about it,
No,
but
no, it's a whole
yeah,
thing.
if it's possible to be summarized.
No, it is. I was a member of his community for a long time, during which I had a positive estimation of his character. And when I started to create my own content, like 3.5 years ago, we would converse infrequently and dismount. Disagreements would mount to the point now where we have a pretty explicitly antagonistic relationship. Though he seems to be far more interested in rekindling the old flame than I do.
Gotcha. And so your understanding, why do you think he has this donation sound?
I think it's about the type of community that he fosters relative to my own. If I had to take a guess, so the content that I do, being political, does occasionally dip into drama. I mean, politics is very drama based, and drama is often political. The type of stuff people go after for each other on tend to be weighted based on our pre-existing ethical and political biases. So there is a big overlap, but that doesn't mean that all are the same. And for drama communities, oftentimes they try to I'm trying to think of how, because it's actually a very complicated topic. I think the best way to distill it is that the whole point of enjoying drama is that you take pleasure out of the antics of other people, usually in contentious situations, usually at the expense of the people involved. Oftentimes, drama communities on YouTube kind of rely on a negative estimation of the people involved. That way you can just laugh at them. Maybe people's feelings get hurt, but they're all bad people. It's fine. So the goal in those environments is to create an understanding of the people at whom you're trying to laugh, where anything they do by virtue of just the person doing it becomes funny, that they become an object of ridicule naturally. You don't even need them to do anything. And I think one of the ways that you can do this really effectively, and this is like a component of the term, I think, in internet parlance is lolcow. It also fits into political dehumanization. There are a ton of things that overlap here. But I think the broad goal is like you want to make the very existence of someone hilarious. A great way of doing that is to make a caricature out of them. So reducing people to sound bits and then like making them the sound bit is a good way of doing that. That's not to say it's like evil to do that or whatever. I do think it's obsessive that he does it in particular. I don't think it's innately evil to like, I have a Jordan Peterson quote as one of my donation sounds right now. And I do think it's very funny, but I think it plays into that because when you hear like the Jordan Peterson dono sound, you're like, yep, that sure is a funny sound bit, and then you get to laugh at that. And it sort of reduces a person to that in your mind, in a perceptive state. Does that make any sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that generally conforms with a lot of the research that I've read in this general area. So I'm just curious briefly. I imagine that I can guess what you think of Jordan Peterson, but just explicitly, what's your general opinion of him if you have this donation that uses his voice?
I have a strong negative opinion of him. I don't think I don't think it's an exclusively negative thing because the other dono sounds that I have are like clips from songs that people have made about me that are positive. I don't think that every reduction to a clip is necessarily a negative thing, but I think it's always an element of caricaturization. And depending on your relationship with that person, it's always going to take on like an exaggerated form of the biases you already have against them. Like I don't like the political figure Ben Shapiro. I don't think he's stupid by any means, But if I were to take the stupidest thing that he said, make that a sound clip, and then I hear it 58 times a day, like, my perception of him is going to be framed through that narrow window, and it's definitely going to bias. Like, I'll think like, oh yeah, what an idiot, right? You know, because I already dislike him, it's easy to think of it that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Those are really the two big questions that I have. So I guess this would be the end of a normal interview that I do. I guess the final thing is I'll tell you. So in general, what I'm researching, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is just the phenomenon of hostile donations, or when people use sort of pro-social behaviors. Giving money to people is generally like a pro-social thing to do, and how people can use that to hurt other people. So I would be taking your interview as well as interviews with a bunch of other people who have made donations. For example, some people donated it to Planned Parenthood in Mike Pence's name when he was elected, which they were obviously very upset about. And just taking those stories and compiling them along with a bunch of lab studies and some quantitative data, just to show that, you know, this phenomenon exists and some people could use sort of hostile appeals to solicit more donations in some contexts.
Yeah, and I
and
want to.
so
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
just really quick. I want to say as well, this isn't as much a case with me, but it is something that I think is important to point out, you know? Obviously, for a lot of live streamers, this is their job, and I make enough money that any individual set of donations is just going to be like a drop in a bucket for a given month, right? But for a lot of smaller streamers, if they're getting mean donations, there's actually a really perverse incentive for them to not ban the person who's doing it, or for them to kind of like enable or facilitate the abuse. Because like, if you're like a smaller live streamer, you're just getting off, you're on, you know, YouTube or whatever, a $5 dono could potentially represent one half of making up an hourly minimum wage for that hour of streaming that you've done. And I've seen this happen with smaller streamers, where they'll get like a bunch of negative attention through donos, and the people who are giving them the negative attention are doing it through donos because they know the person's poor enough and desperate enough for money that that medium of harassment will keep them from getting banned. A good example of this would be Wings of Redemption, who was like a big, to use an earlier term, lolcow, where he would play video games and get really, really angry, and people would donate just to make fun of him, and he would get really upset, and like it was a very like mutually negative situation. You know, this wasn't like a bit. Like, he was obviously miserable, but he also paid his rent with the harassment donos that he would get, and that was the nature of like all the donations that he would get. That was like his job. It was to go there and to be miserable so that people would give him money to exacerbate his misery. And that is a deeply fucked up situation. You know, I don't think that's the norm by any means, but like, yeesh. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for giving me that scenario. I might have to look into it. Yeah, and it's certainly true that, you know, this can be good or bad, right? You know, these sorts of appeals can motivate people to donate to Planned Parenthood. It can also motivate them to donate to pro-life charities if they have like a different set of moral values. Um, so thank you so much again for agreeing to do this interview. I'm going to be taking this and kind of compiling it with a bunch of the other data I have. And then when it, hopefully, fingers crossed, becomes a paper and gets published, I'll send it to you so you can take a look
Please do.
to see
I'd be
what
delighted.
you contributed to. I'd also like your chat to know that I am Canadian. They seem to be talking a lot about that. They keep saying Canadian or Minnesotan, so I'm Canadian.
Yeah, Minnesota's culturally Canadian, to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, close enough. You know?
I guess the last brief thing is you gave some verbal consent at the start. Would you be okay with signing a consent form saying that I can use this data?
Oh, sure. Just email it over to me. I'll do whatever signature thingy whatever system.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I sent you an email through DocuSign, and it should be to your Gmail account, the one that I sent before.
Gotcha. I'll have it over by the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Okay. Have a wonderful day.